I recall one of my trips. I've been in Tanzania 5 times. I recall standing around in a little village outside Iringa when they were going to pump water for the very first time in a well that had been provided through the partnership of people here and people there. The entire village gathered. It wasn't just the members of the church, though most in that village were Lutherans. Everybody gathered. Everybody was full of joy, and as that water flowed out of those first pumps, people's lives were transformed. It was palpable. It was visible. You could see the change that had happened. When Jesus tells us in the Gospel of John that he has come to give us life abundant, there was abundance in that village because of what God had done in this relationship between our people and theirs.
When you talk water, it's a very broad subject. For us, it's hygiene and sanitation and clean, safe water for drinking. And it's a real issue, and I think it's becoming more of an issue with population growth, with pollution, and it is a focus of St. Paul Partners, which is one of the affiliated programs with Bega. Waterborne disease, I think, kills more kids under the age of 5 than anything else, and it's a real issue, and it's not easily measured. We've tried to go into villages, as an example, and get statistics on school attendance prior to a well going into a village and after a well going in, and it's very hard to get that information. But everything that we've seen would indicate that the attendance records would go up significantly, and just the general health of the village goes up.
First of all, you're halfway across the world to begin with, so just being that far from home is going to be, everything is going to be different, and you're going to have a lot of new experiences that way. But then the people, meeting all the people, going on safaris and seeing, animals that you only see in zoos just in the wild, that's amazing in itself. Going to their church service and getting the difference between that and what you would hear.
Well, we first experienced their music on the arrival because they came down the hills from their church when we arrived. In fact, it was even well before we arrived at their church. There were people outside along the side of the road singing, dancing. And so they escorted us joyfully up to their village. They were singing and dancing all the way.
There's something about music that's just very spiritual again. Everyone can relate. One can feel the joy in the music there, and you can't sit down. It's very lively. Everybody gets to dance, and even in church, you can break out in song in an instant, which is exciting. And we may not even understand the words, but we know that they're talking about the love of Jesus and that there is hope for the future. There's always hope. Where sometimes here, in the midst of everything we have, we don't see hope. And part of it, they don't have all this stuff. America, life is good. But in Tanzania, they can look forward to something better. We in America may not know of anything better than what we've got. Life is real good here. And yet they have something to look forward to. They have a lot of death. And our children, having seen that and having to deal with, how would you deal with the death of your sibling or your parent, your sister, your brother? your baby sister. How would you deal with that? But seeing how they deal with that and saying, this child is with Christ. My loved one is in heaven in someplace better than here, which again we can't understand in America. But over there, life. They could see life could be better. No death, no tears.
One of the most incredible things that you learn when you're there is how they live, bubbling over with the Spirit and the joy that faith brings, and a true relationship with God. And you come home and you have your cell phone and you have all this stuff, and you just look at it and you're like, there's so much stuff here that gets in the way of how I could live.
It's all about finding joy in the little things, and playing tic-tac-toe on a grid drawn in the dirt with leaves and twigs. I mean, you don't need fancy computer games to be happy. You don't need a smartphone. You don't need all of this crazy, fancy stuff. That just kind of clouds your vision and gets in the way of what really matters. And that's the relationships.
We know we're serving the Lord, and the rewards are so much more than what we give. We think, well, we're going to go over there and we're going to help these people. And what they give us when we bring back is so much more than we could possibly take over there. It is just phenomenal, the goodness that we feel after having been there for our trip.
I think for us, it has been life-changing. It really has changed the focus, the way we do things, that this is part of our budget that we go every other year, that we help other people to go to. And the big thing is really has helped me talk about my faith. So we are more generous, and our church most definitely is. We are not a very big church, and yet we sponsored 18 kids this year to go to high school. And anytime we ask for money for Tanzania, somehow it all works out. And yet they help at the food shelf. They see more opportunities. And we weren't like that before. It really has changed the way our church looks at missions, and that we aren't just inside, we're outside the building.
The number of students that our church sponsored, secondary school students, was about 7 before we went. That was in 2007, and the funds for that came right out of the church budget. We came back having heard that education was one of the most important needs of the congregation that we visited. So we began to expand that by talking to individuals within the church. And now many people are sponsoring students on their own, in addition to the ones in the church budget. And we have increased the number of students that we sponsor. Every year we've been able to sponsor more. So the interest in that and support of that within the congregation was a direct outreach of that first mission trip.
We sponsored at the beginning 4 students. One of those students, his name is Kelvin Enzolano, and a very articulate young man. We had the opportunity to connect with him, to visit with him, was quite articulate with his English, and a very understanding guy, very, very insightful. We connected with him a couple times by accident, actually, back in Iringa after we were out in the parish and then at the school. We continued to help him and support him in his education, and after he worked all the way through secondary school to get honors, arranged for some members of the church and my family to support him to go on to university and beyond. To see what he's been able to accomplish in his life through his education And now he's teaching economics at Moshi University in the northern part of the country. To support him, not only his education, to support him in his marriage and his wedding to his new wife, and then to see what he has gone on to do to make a difference in his country, to educate others, to help with microfinance, and to set up SACOs and community cooperatives around the country.
We'd been out to a remote village and we were coming back in a Bega vehicle. I was unfortunately driving when we made a quick stop and didn't realize the place that we had stopped was real muddy, and so the vehicle kind of began to sink and kind of tip, and we were stuck. Now, the communication piece of this is kind of fun because the others in the vehicle that were Tanzanians got out and started calling up the mountains, because we were in the valley of the area, calling up the mountains. And within probably 3-4 minutes, here came folks carrying their sickles and their machetes, and they got down to work and they did what they needed to do, and we were on our way. But I love that it just took that shout to the mountain to get that help. And that's one of the gems of Tanzania, I think, particularly the Iringa diocese, because that's what I'm familiar with, is that nothing is ever a problem because everyone communicates and works together to solve whatever issue you find yourself in when you're traveling there. And it's delightful.
Going to Africa is a life-changing experience for anyone who goes, and it can be a life-changing experience for those around people who go.
It's a trip that it changes you, and it's in a good way, and it lasts.
It will change your life. It will change your perspective, and by that it'll change others' lives too.
What happens out of these relationships is not simply transformative for the work that happens in those faraway places. It transforms who we are and what we are as God's people. It transforms our congregations from ingrown religious clubs to faith communities that give themselves away for the sake of the world. It will transform you as one who is interested in your faith life, not just for the boost you get in your own faith community, but because of your recognition in very clear ways of what God has called us to be and to do in the world.